In 1992, a rookie named Shaquille O'Neal put his stamp on the NBA, and he did it in the most unique way possible. At just 20 years old, Shaq would dunk with such superhuman force that he'd casually rip down entire basketball nets. The NBA had never seen someone so freakishly strong. It was scary, and they had to adjust. The very next season, the league Shaq-proofed all of their equipment. They switched to shatter-resistant glass and stronger backboard braces to stop this menace from tearing down every net in the league. Nowadays, it'll take over 6,000 pounds of force in a piano to take down an entire net. And we can thank Shaq. The Diesel only got bigger, stronger, and scarier throughout his career. It got to a point where the man was legitimately unstoppable. And that's what we'll be touching on today. Stories, stats, and numbers that illustrate just how scary and intimidating it was to go up against Shaq. Because if you were a player, you worried. And if you were a backboard, you feared for your life.
Shaquille O'Neal is the most dominant force I have ever seen.
Like, Shaq physically was the most dominant player we have ever seen.
For real. But Shaq was one of those guys that I feared.
How strong was he?
Impossible to guard.
Impossible.
They literally had to change the physical equipment because they had never seen someone with that level of strength before.
Who would Shaq be if he had your work ethic?
He'd be the greatest of all time.
Sensation.
You can watch 20 seconds of a Shaq mixtape and immediately realize why he was so feared. He physically punished players with his size and strength. I mean, the dude was a man amongst boys in a league of giants. Once you wrap your mind around that fact, you understand the scary aspect that Shaq brought to the table. However, just by hearing me talk about it and watching his highlights, you don't get the full story. We don't feel the fear that he injected into his opponents. And to truly understand that terror, we have to hear from the players who did. Tim Legler's an NBA journeyman who's known nowadays for his work at ESPN, but back in the 90s, he was in the league with Shaq. On a podcast with JJ Redick, he mentioned that the closest he ever felt to fear when facing an opponent was the Diesel. He recalls seeing other guys being a little more nervous lacing up their shoes on nights that they had to face him, because Shaq would put players on video clips that can last a lifetime. And he's absolutely right. He goes on to tell a story about trying to hack Shaq when he was going up for a basket, and he remembers hitting the Diesel as hard as he can on both his forearms, quickly realizing that it did absolutely nothing, and that his body was starting to go upwards. Shaq was taking him up with him before he eventually let go. But O'Neal was so damn strong that another professional athlete hitting him as hard as he can was like a leaf landing on his arm. His strength is inconceivable. Scottie Pippen, of course, is one of the greatest defenders in league history, and he says he didn't fear many players throughout his career, but Shaq was different. Channing Frye also had a funny story from guarding Diesel back in 2005. He recalls O'Neal and the Heat being down 6 in the third quarter, and Shaq turns to Channing and says,
"Okay, good game, Lil Fry. We gotta win this now."
And Shaq destroyed him that whole quarter, as Fry referred to him as a tree that moves like a cat. It was dunk after hook shot after dunk. It was impossible to move a human that big. Shaq had the unique ability to instill fear into some of the tallest and strongest men on the planet. His strength and agility is talked about as if he was some sort of mythical creature, or a tree that moves like a cat.
Portland has 3 timeouts left. The Lakers have 2. Bryant
want to make this clear before we jump into this topic. When I say the most dominant player of all time, I view dominance as an overpowering physical skill. A player is so great with that one skill that he doesn't need anything else in his game. Your opponent knows exactly what you're going to do, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. That's how I view dominance. So when it comes to the title of the most dominant player of all time, I'm here to tell you that it's Shaq, and it's not even close. A lot of people like to put Wilt Chamberlain in that conversation, but I have a stat that will slice that argument in half. Throughout his 16-year career, Wilt played against a total of just 15 7-footers, and of those 16 seasons, he was the tallest player in the NBA for 10 of them. Wilt clearly had an advantage. Now, get this. When Shaq won the MVP in 2000, he faced a total of 35 7-footers in that season alone. In 1 year, Shaq faced more than double the number of 7-footers that Wilt faced throughout his entire career, while also being the 12th tallest player in the league. Shaq was just as dominant, if not unstoppable, while facing players his height night in and night out. And I have another stat that encapsulates just that. The way I described dominance earlier was when your opponent knows exactly where you're gonna go, they know exactly what you're gonna do, and there's nothing they can do about it. Shaq was the master of that. In 1997, the NBA began tracking shot distances, and during that season, Shaq averaged nearly 19 points per game within 7 feet from the basket. This range right here, which accounts for over 72% of his total points that season. Stevie Wonder could have told you exactly where Shaq was gonna be, and there was still nothing anyone can do about it. Like literally, nothing. Throughout the rest of his prime from 1997 to 2003, O'Neal averaged over 19 points per game on nearly 63% shooting from this range. Over 69% nights of all his points were scored within 7 feet from the basket year after year after year. It's actually insane. But there's another level to this. Shaq became so unstoppable in the paint that teams began purposely fouling him at the rim to avoid easy baskets, which became known as the Hack-a-Shaq. Because of this, he scored a decent amount of his points at the line, 21% of his total points to be exact, which means during the entirety of his prime, Shaq scored 90.4% of all his points within 7 feet from the basket or at the free throw line. The dude was so unstoppable in this one area that you either allow him to get an easy bucket or you had to purposely foul him. There was no in between. Shaq was a one-trick diesel, and it made him the most dominant player of all time. There isn't much of an argument for Shaq to be the greatest of all time, but there is an argument that his peak was among the greatest ever. Shaq's 3-year final stretch from 2000 to 2002 was near perfection. The Lakers three-peated and he walked away with 3 straight Finals MVPs, the only player in NBA history not named Michael Jordan to pull that off, and he was putting up MJ-type numbers too. In 3 consecutive finals, Shaq averaged 35, 14, 3 and 2 on 59% from the field. Compare those numbers to what Jordan did in both his three-peats, and there's a serious argument that Shaq had the most dominant 3-year final stretch in modern NBA history. The 2000 finals were just video game numbers. I mean, look at this, he babied the Pacers. In 2001, he matched up with Dikembe Mutombo, that season's Defensive Player of the Year, or in other words, the clear-cut best defensive center in the NBA. Shaq averaged 33, 16 and 5 on his head, and the 2002 finals was the cherry on top, 36, 12 and 4, capping off the three-peat and establishing himself as an all-time great. What's funny about Shaq is that he was able to reach this peak that no other player has really gotten to without even trying. I mean, of course he worked on his game and all that, but he was notorious for showing up to training camp overweight, using the season to get in shape for the playoffs, not having the greatest work ethic, and was just all around lazy. Yet he was still able to reach the pinnacle of the sport on more than one occasion. Had he been serious about improving his game and staying in shape with the mindset of a Kobe, the GOAT title could have been his. That's how gifted he was. But without fully committing himself, Shaq still became a top 15 player of all time. It leaves so much to be desired. To say that Shaq is a what-if with the type of career he had is a testament to how unstoppable and dominant this dude was at his peak. He was feared by the biggest of big men and had backboards shaking in their boots. So if you believe Shaq could have been the GOAT, subscribe. I'm making videos every week and your support is truly appreciated. And I want to thank you guys. 10K subs, that's insane. Now I'm gonna go watch some Shaq highlights. See ya.